first and foremost, yay, we're back.
Welcome.
I know, right? It feels like it's been a really long time since we hosted a podcast.
I don't remember the last one.
I feel like it's probably been at least 6 months.
Okay.
But it's a little bit different this time now because it's going to be me and you. And when we add a third person, that's going to be very interesting. So, but I feel like it's all good. And we finally have our nice new studio. It feels like we're just back on track.
Yeah.
Okay, so today I thought we'd cover advertising, of course. And I feel like there's like a plethora of this. Like I feel like I should make a pre-statement about this because last night I was watching the Super Bowl commercials all over again. And it dawned on me that I feel like there's like so many different types of advertising. There's different venues. And I feel like I still want to talk about the Super Bowl advertising, and I still want to talk about how, like, what our different takes are on some of the different commercials we watched.
Yeah.
But I also feel like it's important to note that it's like when you're talking about it for live TV, it's completely different than like an in-venue experience.
Right.
So first off, let me just say I was pretty disappointed actually in the commercials for this year's Super Bowl. What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, there were, aside from a few interesting, and I'm not even necessarily going to say good, but there were a couple interesting things that I think I took away from it.
Yeah.
But as far as from an entertainment perspective, or like, I don't know, there was nothing that really jumped out to me. There was one. And this tells you how good it was as an advertising. I don't even remember what product it was for. I just remember thinking the sloths were kind of funny.
Huh. I can't
So
remember that one.
do you remember this one?
No, I can't.
Yeah. So I couldn't even tell you. I do have a few that I think were interesting.
I do too.
But as far as the one that made me laugh, that was that one, and I can't even tell you what it was for.
Right. And like from a marketer's perspective, I had a few that I also thought were like, okay, like, yeah, I get it. Like, I feel like that was good. Like, Stella was one of the ones that I really liked. The Stella Artois, I think is how you say that. I can never remember how you say the last word. I just always say Stella. But we were actually talking about that before we started rolling today. I thought first off, it was perfectly casted. I felt like between David Beckham and Dave, I can't remember his last name. I felt like they're both so famous, but they're also like, they didn't play up how famous they were in that commercial, but they hinted at it through like David Beckham's story. And I thought like in general, it felt like I was watching like a short film more than I was like a commercial, which like made it land for me a lot more than some of the other ones.
Yeah, and I think that's a success statement in itself, because I think that's what Super Bowl commercials are supposed to be, right?
Right.
They're supposed to be something dramatic, something that feels more like a complete narrative that you would get in a normal commercial, and then later they take that and cut it into multiple 30-second or 15-second spots, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that I think I would call that a success from a meta perspective, right? From a narrative perspective,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you one that I thought was interesting, and it's not going to be too surprising that it was kind of a crossover between a technical thing and art. And coffee, which you and I are both
Huge
big coffee
consumers
drinkers. But the Starbucks commercial I found was very interesting. I don't know if anybody listening to this actually watched our piece that Evan did a while ago, our producer, on aspect ratios. And if you haven't watched it, it's great. It's educational. It really goes into how we think about fitting different shaped graphics onto a fixed shape like LED display. But what Starbucks did, as far as I can tell, there's two main aspect ratios that most of us at least people my age, you're a little probably too young for this, remember 16:9, which is what we have today, right? That's what your computer screen is. And then the old 4:3 aspect ratio is the square thing that I grew up with if you had tube TVs growing up. And it was clear to me that was Starbucks trying to evoke a nostalgia.
Yeah.
And I know that that's part of their stated, like, they're trying to they have some sort of stated mission right now, corporate.
Yeah, it's a rebrand, basically.
Okay.
Like they're going back to their original narrative of like bring the old Starbucks back.
Okay.
Which I felt like between the aspect ratio of that one and also just like the film quality, like they went back into the 80s, like it literally, and it must have been very intentional just from like even the music choice. Like I can't remember when Starbucks started. Somebody should look that up. Producer Evan, you should look that up. But I feel like if it was like in the 70s or the 80s, like everything fit that iconic era. And to be honest, like I'm not a Starbucks person. You know this about me. But I don't consume massive amounts of Starbucks. Did you look it up?
1971.
Oh, 1971. Okay, so I was pretty close.
Okay, so sorry if that was a little bit jarring. We're in our new studio and we'd had a little bit of a outside noise that we had to get fixed.
You know, little pieces we got to work through.
Yep.
But anyways, I'm not a huge Starbucks drinker. I'm not a huge fan of the Starbucks brand. I haven't been for a long time. I think it's just that I don't really like their coffee that much in comparison to a few others. But I gotta say, the clever marketing is very close to pulling me back in. Because I like the nostalgia. I like that they're going back to their original brand. I feel like that's important.
Yeah, I like it as a trend as a consumer. They had kind of tried to value engineer the whole coffee process to the point where they were maximizing profits, and I think they kind of reached the point of not even diminishing returns, but the point of destructive behaviors, trying to maximize profits to the point where they drove the customer away is my impression, right?
Yeah. It's also very interesting. Like, I feel like we have to attribute Starbucks to like the big boom of like local roasters as well, which like that's the coffee that I now drink.
Same. I mean, I'm not going to say I don't go to Starbucks when I'm out and about, but when I buy coffee for home, I'm buying it from somebody local. It's just hard for somebody who's halfway across the country from us, you know,
for sure,
to get it here as fresh. So
I felt like that one was good. So the Lay's commercial was another good one that I thought was very interesting. I liked that it was very sentimental. I think from like a marketing perspective and an advertising perspective, we're seeing that more and more where like people are coming back into more of like a brand positioning, values-based market. And what consumers want is authenticity in a world that's very artificial. And I felt like Lay's did a great job of bringing back the humanization of a very, very well-known corporate brand by focusing on the family aspect of it actually comes from farmers, the potatoes, that kind of thing. So like whether or not that's truly a statement that Lay's can make, I thought like, yeah, I could buy into that. Like I do understand that like Lay's supports family-owned farms.
Yeah.
That is true, you know?
Yeah.
So I thought that was a good way to like rephrase it in consumers' minds again. So
cool.
I think there was a lot of good things. I feel like the only one that I was very disappointed in was Liquid Death. And then we'll transition a little bit into like talking.
I don't think I even saw the Liquid Death one.
There was a Liquid Death one. It was very disappointing. The reason why is because it was something like drink while you're at work.
Oh, I did see that.
And I was like, this just lands poorly for so many reasons. Like number one, it didn't hit the right audience. Like I felt like the people that they were like capturing in the commercial weren't the right audience for.
Oh yeah, that's our producer pulled this up, so I'm watching it now. Yes, now I'm having a flashback. Yeah,
like I feel like it hit more of like a Gen X when I feel like Liquid Death is very much like a Gen Z, like maybe like late millennial.
Well, okay, so I think there's two audiences. There is this older audience that is trying not to drink alcohol.
Yeah, that's true.
Do you think that resonates even with them, though?
No, and
because
I feel
a lot
like
of those people are people who have serious issues with alcohol, right? Like that doesn't seem like something we should be making a line out of.
When I showed up at my mother's house and had a Liquid Death in my hand, she looked at me and said, "What are you drinking?"
Yeah, well,
like the brand doesn't align with the message, which I also feel like is why it's very important that you think about that when you're trying to think about how you might expand markets.
Yeah.
Like like branding matters.
Which is odd that we're talking about that with this particular company, because it's been kind of the darling of marketing for a while, right? Like everybody just looks at, oh, it's so genius. Like it is purely a brand driven company. Yeah, it does feel like a big miss. I hadn't even really thought about it.
It's just weird. It's just weird to me. But all of this to say, like, I feel like one thing that people could take, specifically like athletic directors and brands who are talking about sponsorships, who are talking about how to advertise in venue, is you can't necessarily adopt these specific commercials or like this, like the long format, 1 minute, like that's a long format commercial. But like 15-second glimpses that are like super impactful is like, number one, make sure you're hitting the right audience. Two, make sure that it's incredibly engaging, whether it's like a real experience that's happening in venue or it's even like something that lands like, Ysleta was a really good example of that. Ysleta Independent School District in El Paso, where they had that car guy. I can never remember his name. And Charlie's talked about it on our podcast before, like episodes back. And he had a jingle and the students kept singing it over and over again. And it like became this huge thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's the kind of stuff that you want to do. Like you want it to be very thoughtful.
Along those lines, I think there was one other that I had called out in my mind that kind of stuck out. And I think it kind of meets that exactly what you're talking about, where there's something to take from it for our audience, for athletic directors.
Yeah.
And that was it's Circle water bottle. I don't know the product at all. Have no idea why they can afford a Super Bowl commercial. I don't know. Maybe that's just the boomer in me. I have no idea what was going on with it. But what I thought was super cool was they said, oh yeah, and if you signed up to get one of these, they've just been delivered. Seriously, go check your door right now. That crossover between real world and where you're consuming media, I think is super powerful. And I think we've talked about this in the past. I don't know if it's been on any of our podcasts, but it's something that our Chief Product Officer David and I and you have talked about a lot, which is bring kind of take the event, make an event out of something, and then sponsor it. And there's kind of that crossover there where not only are you blending between the screen and the real world, but you're also taking something kind of cool like a delivery in this case, which I guess isn't that cool, but it met their purpose, and engaging the audience, right? So anybody who was the target audience for that commercial is not only just thinking about your brand because there's a commercial, because I was totally disengaged from it, aside from the intellectual part of it. Now you've got a certain percentage of your audience, and they're the people who have bought your product that are getting up off the couch and going to their door to check and see if it was there.
If it's there.
Right?
Exactly.
I think you can extend that into the arena, into your gym.
Yeah.
And we talk about stuff like that. I mean, and this isn't like revolutionary for a lot of athletic directors or for people who are used to running maybe higher level productions where you have a production script and at halftime you're going to run a trivia, right? But I'm trying to think back the last time I was in an arena where they did a trivia, it wasn't even sponsored.
Yeah.
But that's exactly the kind of like thing that gets people engaged.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, but back to kind of what you were saying about like having more of like an in-venue engagement.
Yeah, sponsored engagement pieces. I think there's a fairly large advertiser in our area that advertises at several of the high schools. It's orthopedics, and I can't remember the proper name, so I won't try and speculate. But I think they were really into that idea of, I guess for me, I think it's way more engaging to do, like a trivia or a shell game, or think about some of the gamification things that you can do with
Yeah.
your displays. And I know we've done some blog posts on that in the past, so there's probably a lot of stuff out there, but maybe that's something we can consider for an upcoming episode. But
You know what? Actually, okay, I know the perfect person that I feel like we should talk to about that. And as you're saying this, it's making me think. One of the really good games that I've seen was, and the reason why I'm thinking about this person is because he finally saw someone win it for the first time, and he's like the PA for the Huskers for certain athletic events, but then also certain games.
Right.
Was First National Bank does a cash prize. Have you heard of this?
no.
They lay like I don't know if it's like an actual item. It's like something that's down on the basketball court floor. And the person's blindfolded. They start in a specific spot. And then the crowd tells him, like, go to the left, go to the right, go straight, and like tries to describe it to him. And then if they get it, then they get like thousands of dollars.
That's cool.
And this guy actually just did it. And I was like, that is so smart, because like it doesn't have to be a lot for like high schools especially, but like they had First National Bank up on the TV. Up on the TV, up on the LED scoreboard. They had the PA like announce like sponsored by First National, like it was a whole thing. And then afterwards, when the guy actually won, they did like a whole entire thing about it where it was like, guy wins $1,000 from First National Bank. And it's like, then he got even more exposure. Like, I feel like there's so many.
That seems like something that'd be easy to get local news to pick up on too, right?
Exactly. And
that's
like,
great.
I think that's a big part of this too, is like, I feel like this whole entire world of advertising and sponsorship around high school athletics is a very new and like yet strongly evolving landscape where we see a lot of brands that are national. We see some that are local and regional. I personally think from a school's perspective, local and regional will always be more beneficial. It's just more connected to the community. Typically, I feel like there's a higher dollar value for them because national brands tend to like want to capitalize on an entire region. Yeah. So like there's like a bigger pool, yes, but it's like a smaller pot at the end.
Right.
You know what I mean?
I think that's the thing where if you have national sponsors who are willing to advertise at your venue, you'd be silly not to.
Right.
But you can't neglect the local. That's probably what's paying your bills.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. And I feel like there's a huge opportunity for local and regional sponsors to have stronger engagement just in general as like a multi-channel campaign, meaning like for our customers specifically, they get the in-venue experience, they get the out-of-venue experience because of Fan App. But then in addition to that, like contact your local radio. Hey, athletic directors, here's an idea. Like bundle your sponsorship packages and talk to your radio stations and have radio ads that are covering high school athletics, push your sponsors towards them and sponsor in venue. And then you have like this full loop.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I do. And I'm just sitting here as we're talking about this. It just struck me that I think what you described, kind of ties back in another way to what we were talking about earlier on the Super Bowl commercials, which is authenticity. That experience with the whole crowd engaged and cheering and directing somebody around them, that's an authentic experience.
Right.
And it's easily authentic. It's not struggling to say something artificial, which is, let's be honest, a person's relationship with a brand is an artificial thing.
Right.
Obviously, a brand has an advantage if they can turn that into an authentic relationship, but I think that's how you do it.
100%.
Yeah.
And I think there's so many opportunities for that in today's like evolving landscape of high school athletics. I think right now it's still a little bit premature, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
Like there's still a lot of fixed digit scoreboards out in high school athletics, and there's still like, I feel like it's just now popping off. Like people are just now accepting new technology. The other aspect of this is you can get your students involved in creating these ads.
That's what I was just going to say. I think the other thing that's lagging behind is the ability to run that level of production. So when I'm talking about you mentioned the Huskers, I'm thinking it was one of our college customers that I was at last that I actually saw trivia. So the ability to get to where you can have an MC right? And that takes one of two things. One is the funding to have a staff person or an outside person do it, or the engagement from your student body and your teaching staff to nurture that. And that's, I think, what ScoreVision has always kind of hoped for and hoped to nurture. And we're still working both ourselves and with partners to try and nurture that, because I think it's a clear value.
I know. And it's so hard because like you want these schools to do it so bad. You understand, like, obviously every single school, I don't care which school you're at, unless you're at like a very prestigious private school, like everyone struggles with funding, everyone, and lack of resources. And so I get those things. I think it's very interesting though, like you do see some districts or some schools that are able to find one individual that really just like starts the seed of adoption. And like, I think for me personally, I think about the Bay, which is a specialization school that's ran through LPS. It's in Lincoln, Lincoln Public Schools. And shout out to the Bay. You should look them up, everyone, because they are doing great work. But there was these two guys, they founded what was called the Bay. And it was a program that originally was pulling kids basically off the streets and putting them into a skateboard park because they wanted to skate more. And they noticed that a lot of these kids were showing up at these skate parks and not wanting to go to school. And throughout like all of their youth programs that they developed over time, it became this hub of students who were learning and engaging more, who had more student involvement, who then they ended up starting the specialization school focused specifically on digital media, like social media, content creation, the works. And it became this really big thing. And now I think to myself all the time, I'm like, man, if Lincoln Public Schools would update their scoreboards and then take the Bay students and be like, this is now the broadcasting program, like that's huge. Like it doesn't have to be a school by school basis. Like work with your fellow colleagues across all schools, find the one, and then campaign for this program because these students need it. Like it's not even that they want it anymore. It's that they need it. And I feel like from a digital media aspect, there's two like avenues, right? There's the in-venue, but then there's also the social media side. And social media,
I don't know what appeals to kids more today than the ability to grow their skills as content creators. Every kid I talk to, when you ask them what they want to do, it seems like maybe every third kid, I want to be a Twitch streamer, I want to be a YouTuber.
Right. Yeah. And like you have to teach them. And here's the deal. It's not just teaching them how to do it. It's also teaching them how to have a healthy relationship with a very digital world. And I feel like that's something that schools, like that's the whole point of public education and private education. Like that's the whole point of education and as a whole is to help set people up for a healthier and better future. So like schools, you need to start getting on board with this. Like you need to be advocating for it. If you're a teacher and you're listening to this podcast and you're like, how do I do that? Contact me. Like I would love to sit down and help you work through that. And I know our trainer would too. Like our director of training, she was a teacher, right? And she has a ton of experience like talking with schools about how to do this and move it forward. But I think it's a very exciting time. And schools should look at their students like a very powerful tool to help them promote this further. And when it comes to the fundraising aspects, like that's also changing, right? Like it's a changing landscape because of things that are happening politically. It's a changing landscape because of things that are happening with just like overall athletic and activities from a collegiate level that's like experiencing the trickle down effect. And so with all of that going on, like your students have the power to help you solve one of your largest problems. Right?
That's a great way to put it.
And so like one of the schools I can think of right off the top of my head is Grace Prep Academy. They did a phenomenal job of doing this years ago. Must have been 4 or 5 years ago. And they raised a ton of money. I think it was like, I'd have to look. I think it was like $450,000 a year or something is what they were getting off of their scoreboards for advertising. And they had their students actually create the sponsors ads for the brand.
That makes sense. I mean, I didn't do a ton with newspaper when I was in high school, but in print, that's how we did it. I mean, not only were we creating the ads, we were selling them. I mean, our newspaper staff was going out and soliciting the advertisement. I don't know if that's still a thing. I hope it is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a hugely valuable, whether you plan on going into marketing, media, or whatever, getting out and trying to sell a product to a local business as a junior or senior, because that's what most of those people were. That's crazy life experience.
Yeah.
That's
and like
great.
one that you kind of need, because you also have to learn how to sell yourself, right?
Absolutely. And if you have any kids that are interested in entrepreneurship, anything like that, if they're interested in marketing, if they're interested in media, if they're interested in entrepreneurship, that's step one, is trying to figure out how to sell yourself and sell your ideas.
Right. And it's so critical. And I wish that more people would do it. I thought Grace, when they did that, they did such a phenomenal job. And the thing is like, it was beneficial for everyone. It was beneficial for the student because they got experience. It was beneficial for the school because they needed the fundraising, they needed the money in order to continue to take care of their athletic and activities programs. But then also it was beneficial for the brand itself, because who doesn't want to watch their kid have a great commercial that they created up on the big screen? Like, I'm more inclined to watch an advertisement where my kid created it.
Right.
And the kids did a phenomenal job. Like, here's the deal. When I went back and watched it, I was like, I would buy that because it was so funny and clever.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like we'd have to like look and see if we can find it. I don't know if we can find it. And if we can, maybe we'll cut it in.
Yeah.
But it was like they were running through the hallways, and like it was very funny. Things were like flying at them, and like they were catching things and like throwing
I
them
didn't
back
realize
out.
that's the one you were talking about. We were talking about this exact one the other day.
Yeah.
So it's made an impact here in the office, if nothing else.
Yeah, and it was super entertaining.
And I think it goes beyond just, your kid. I mean, I don't know what it was for you in high school, but there were probably 10 or 12 of us that were hanging out. Now every one of our parents is going to be interested in every one of the things that one of us is doing. So,
Right.
yeah, it spreads beyond that really quick.
Yeah. So I feel like there's a lot of power there. Now, like national brand wise, I find it very interesting because I'm not sure, like right now, and the way that things are and the competitive landscape that we're in, I don't think there's a lot of room for national brands in high school advertising for sports. I think eventually we may see it become more.
Why do you say that? I'm just curious.
Because I feel like there hasn't been enough adoption of in-venue, like LED professional experiences to quite like support the mass amount that they need. Where I do see this popping off is if there is more LED that's installed into high schools all over the U.S., which is becoming a bigger and bigger thing. It's happening now all the time. Obviously, that's why we exist. Right. But as there's more and more adoption, and with the changes at the collegiate level for name, image, and likeness, I feel like there's a lot of power in targeting state by state.
I was just going to say, I think
venues.
that you see this transition when the national brands can have, well, I guess what I would call a force multiplier, and that would be being able to target more than one screen at once. And so to me, there's a couple ways you do that. And I don't know about state by state because I'm not sure that anybody at the state level has the power to sign those agreements, but districts, we have several districts out there where every school in the district has multiple screens, indoor, outdoor, things like that. And the other way would be through a digital media services group. We partner with a couple, I think. Yeah. Where a national brand can go in, and however many customers they have, they're getting it as a one-stop shop, because the return is like the amount of bureaucracy that Nike has to go through or something like that to advertise in a stadium. It's not necessarily worth it for one school, even if it's a large high school.
Exactly. Like, and then you take, so with the name, image, and likeness, what I always think about is, okay, so like so-and-so, like a collegiate player who works with a brand, they're not allowed to show that commercial in venue, right? Like for college. So like it has to be detached from the overall collegiate brand. Yeah. So like if your target is sports enthusiasts who are in a collegiate venue, who are of the age where they have high school kids, like that is your target. Like you would benefit from producing a mass commercial with a collegiate player and then targeting the state by which they're playing in, right? Like that makes sense to me. So I don't know. I'm excited for it because I'm hoping we're going to see this transition. I think like encouraging athletic directors to think about what this landscape looks like for them is super important, and know like it is baby steps, but there are tools out there and resources out there to help you be successful, right? And like
I think we're doing some work. Like I said, it's not all ScoreVision, but I think it's something that we've seen a need for. I mean, it goes back to what you were saying. We have teachers on staff now, former teachers on staff now. We have worked with several companies that are developing or have developed curriculum. I know it's easy to sit there and roll your eyes at us. We're not teachers. And we say we recognize the challenges, but we don't live them day to day. It's easy to sit there and look at us and be like, yeah, right. Yeah, we can do this, right. But we're trying to put in the work too. And so we're getting educated about all the different resources that are available. And like you said, hopefully people can reach out.
Reach out to us if you want to educate us further.
Yeah, if there's something
like if you have ideas, like I feel like that's probably my favorite thing about our company, just like in general. And this isn't even like a product stance. It's just like a people stance of like when we say reach out to us and give us feedback, we actually mean it. Like we do.
Well, we try to act on it.
Right. And like we want to hear it because it's how we grow. Like it's not a promise that we can make that we're going to put everything into action.
That's what I was going to say. We can't act on every single thing. We're still a relatively small team.
Right.
But
we weigh everything.
Yeah.
And we try our best.
And if we start hearing it from 2 people, from 3 people, from 10 people, from 20 people, that's what gets us moving. So
right. I love that about us. What a good brand.
Let's give ourselves a pat on the back.
Oh, my goodness gracious. Okay, well, I think that's it for today, but hopefully there's going to be more coming out related to advertising. I would love to hear everyone's requests, and I feel like, there's so many different aspects of this, like even the out-of-venue experience, I feel like is another thing that it's just like you could focus just on that.
Absolutely, and I think gamification, I think focusing on, I think there's a lot of potential to talk about there too.
Yeah. So.
All right. Thanks.
Great. Thanks.